constantly under video or physical surveillance by my nudist neighbor. Hi. Me, a 28-year-old woman, and my significant other, a 28-year-old man, have lived in a townhouse for 3 years. On the very first day we moved in, our neighbors from across the way introduced themselves. They're empty nesters in their late 50s. Very warm and welcoming immediately. Told us if we needed anything at all to just let them know. All that stuff. One of the first things the wife, we'll call her S, said to us upon meeting was, "I'm really into nature, so I look outside to look at all the wildlife a lot. That's also why we have cameras facing the street." We didn't think too much of it at the time, but now looking back, this should have really freaked us out, especially considering we live in fucking suburbia, where the closest thing to nature is a squirrel or a rogue coyote. The husband works from home, but he's not the issue in this situation. It's the wife, S. S is disabled, can't drive, and is a hermit. They never leave the house, literally home 24/7. We learned almost immediately that looking at nature was actually code for being an extremely nosy neighbor that borderlines being a peeping Tom. I included a shitty drawing on how the layout of our townhouses are, because it's very important to this. Our places are reverse mirrors of the other houses across the narrow street, close enough where I could throw a rock and almost hit their house. Both houses are on the second story with garages underneath, so clear view of each other. We only have windows of the side facing their house, as the other side shares a wall with another neighbor. S is stationed primarily on the couch in front of their patio door, 24/7. If anything happens outside, she literally runs to the patio window and stares out with her face pressed to the glass. Doesn't matter if it's a car, a neighbor walking their dog, or a fucking delivery truck. She is always there, watching. We kind of brushed it off at first that she's just bored and probably stir crazy being at home constantly. But over time, I started getting really annoyed, whereas my significant other brushed it off and said she's harmless. But the closer we got to these neighbors, the worse it's gotten and the more creeped out I've become. And I mean closer lightly, because all that means is that S added me on Facebook and we exchanged numbers as she's offered to let our guests park in our driveway and to let us know if our camera spots a coyote since we have a little dog. Like most boomers, she comments and likes every single thing I post on Facebook, almost immediately. Okay, not a huge deal, whatever. But I'll post a vacation pic and she'll comment, "Makes sense why you're not home." Or a picture of us outside and she'll say, "Oh, that's why you were out there." Just like weird shit. This next part may not be really important to the story, but to me, emphasizes a boundary crossing. A few months after we moved in, S messaged me on Facebook that the place her and her husband go camping every summer is actually a nudist camping ground. It's called Ponderosa Sun Club for anyone curious. She sent the link and said, "Let me know what you think." S also casually brought up in a conversation once that they do tasteful boudoir photo shoots pretty early on into meeting them as well. Not judging, but it rubbed me the wrong way that she told me as our relationship isn't like that. We still aren't sure what she meant by, "Let me know what you think." If it was to see if we were accepting and wouldn't judge, or if we were interested. To be frank, they're a kooky, nerdy, frumpy couple in their late 50s. My significant other and I are decently good-looking people. The few friends we told about this joked and said, maybe they have the hots for us. She also primarily wears a t-shirt that only barely falls past her butt. Okay, back to the peeping Tom aspect. Like I said, she's constantly looking out the window. I can park my car on the street illegally just for a few seconds to grab something, and she'll text me before I can even get inside that I can use her parking spot if need be. She'll text me if I'm home from work on a day that I usually work to ask if I'm okay. She watches us all day put up our Christmas lights, or if I'm vacuuming my car in the driveway. She'll wait until I'm outside watering my plants to run out and water hers at the same time. We can't even enjoy our patio because she just stares at us the whole time. The biggest thing that really sucks is that I'm a houseplant hobbyist, and I was so excited to move here as the windows are all south-facing, which is wonderful for my plants. But if I keep the blinds open, It gives her a full view of our place. We put up a sticker privacy glass on our bedroom windows so we could at least enjoy opening the blinds in the morning. Her one camera literally sits on a windowsill, just facing our house. Last winter, I found that she had a hidden nature camera by where we always walk our dog on public property, and I got so mad that I flicked it off and buried it in the snow. Then I noticed a few days later, the windowsill camera was changed to turn down towards the street, but now it's back on our house. For fuck's sake. When I looked at our houses on Google Street View, you can literally see her standing in the window, staring at the Google car. Like, she's just always there. I've been getting more and more furious about this and feel like a spectacle in my own goddamn house. The final straw was yesterday when my significant other and I pulled into the driveway. I walked immediately into the house, back facing their house the whole time. I was wearing a mask because I felt sick. Before I could even walk up the stairs, S texted me, asked me what's wrong and if I needed anything like soup or ibuprofen. I just burst into tears. I feel so violated in my own home, and I don't know how to set a boundary with her, or if that's even possible. My significant other and I even hypothesized that maybe S telling us about her nature watching in the first few sentences of us meeting was because something happened in the past with one of the previous tenants getting pissed at her being so nosy. They own their townhouse, and we just rent ours. I love our place. Rent is affordable. Location is great. Everything. Besides her. I genuinely don't know what to do, or what to even say to her without it being awkward. It really doesn't help that at the end of the day, she is very kind. One time they were at the nudist colony, so I was getting her mail, and she gave me a $100 Visa gift card as a thank you. Her husband jumped my car when my battery died. She has gifted me flowers for my patio. Her kindness has prevented me from blowing up at her, but I'm at my wits, and I really don't want to move. Man keeps trying to come into my house. I, a 20-year-old woman, recently moved into a new apartment with my boyfriend, who works away for long periods of time. An older man in his 50s started to become friendly with me, knowing I was new to the complex. I made the mistake of telling him I live with my partner, but he's away for work for a while. Almost every day after that, he came knocking on my door and waiting if I didn't answer. He would leave after 5 minutes of knocking with no answer. One time I was out in the common grass area, playing with my little brother that was 2 that would occasionally come over. I saw him coming my way and quickly picked my brother up. The man started making conversation, asking about my brother, and literally tried to grab him out of my arms. I held onto my brother tight and pulled away as he started to cry. I made an excuse that I have to go feed him and walked away. That was the last time I went near that man with my brother. I'm extremely bad with confrontation, as you can tell. A few days later, I heard a knock on my door and opened it without thinking. He walked straight past me into my apartment without even saying a single word, just smiling. I asked him if he was doing okay, and he said, "I'm good, just want to see what your place looked like from the inside," and started walking into every room. He checked all my windows and commented, "So all your windows have bars on them except the bathroom?" I nervously laughed and said, "Yeah, I guess they do." I didn't know what to do, so I walked out into the front garden, hoping he would follow me out of the apartment to try to talk to me. I just wanted him out but was afraid to anger him. I can tell he didn't seem like he was right in the head. Once he came out the front, I closed my door and said, "I have to go to the shop now. Sorry, it's gonna close soon," and walked off. That night, while hanging my laundry out, another neighbor introduced herself. She's in her 30s. I told her what happened and asked if she knew the man. Apparently, he had been doing the exact same things to her. She actually told her partner that this creepy neighbor was doing the same things to a young girl, being me, and that was her partner's last straw. He ended up going and talking to the older man. After that, the older man only tried one more time that I know of to knock on my door, which I hid in my kitchen for 10 minutes until he left. I haven't heard anything since and haven't seen him around, but I wake up at night panicking, thinking that he's planning on doing something to me. My friendly neighbor. This may not be as terrifying as some of the other stories, but it freaked the hell out of me, especially since it was a random shift in personality. A little bit of description and backstory to help paint the picture. At the time of this, I was roughly 26 years old. I'm 30 now. My husband and I lived in a military city. He was enlisted, and this particular city was only popular, not just for the basic house, but by its incredible crime rate. Honestly, if people had warned us ahead of time, we would have happily moved out of the city and dealt with the long drive. But I digress. At the time, we lived in a duplex in a really bad neighborhood. The way the unit was set up was, if you stood in the street or a parking lot style driveway and looked at the house, our unit was to the left, our neighbors to the right, and exposed to the street since our building was on the corner. The entire property was surrounded by a chain link fence, a 6-foot privacy fence that ran along the back of the property to block our view of the parking lot that led to the apartments behind us. As I said, we lived in a horrible neighborhood where unfortunately addicts and prostitution was rampant. But I didn't ever feel overly unsafe. At the time, I had a 200-pound English Mastiff, a sweetheart, but intimidating from a distance, and my size always gave me a hint of security. I'm 5'9", and definitely not a beanpole. We also had a few sweet neighbors which helped buffer the horrible. One such neighbor was a man that walked the neighborhood regularly. He walked everywhere, and our house was about center in his path to the store, so we'd see him at least once a day or so. Dwayne was a nice enough man, my height, roughly my build, and always smiling, but not that creeper kind of smile, a normal, jovial smile. He never set off alarm bells, which makes this more disturbing. We'd been living in our house for about a year, and all the while gotten to know some of our neighbors better. Up until this point, Dwayne would always wave hello and offer some small talk. He'd speak to my husband more than myself because I just don't do well in southern heat, and he tended to be long-winded, so I'd wave, say hello, and then go inside. Everything was fine until my husband was deployed. We'd been married at that point for 6 years, and this was his 5th deployment during the time, so I was used to being left alone. It didn't bother me in the least, especially since it would be a 9-week deployment. Seriously, we were so pissed about that. What a pointless time frame. And I'd already learned the layout of the new city fairly well. One day, I was coming home from the grocery store about 2 weeks after my husband had left. I'm a firm believer in one trip with the bags, so I loaded up my arms completely and headed for the house. As I said before, our yard was completely encased in a fence, so just after I managed to shut the gate, I heard someone calling up at me. Turning, I saw Dwayne bearing his normal, happy, wide smile and heading for me. I shifted my bags and gave him my attention. I was raised to be polite to people, and since I knew him vaguely, I had no problem saying hello. Besides seeing my arms full of groceries, some of which was milk, eggs, and other cold things, he surely wouldn't keep me too long. I was wrong. He starts droning on about nothing in particular, during which I could only smile and nod. I waited patiently for a break in the conversation so I could head inside, but he barely took a second to breathe, let alone let me speak. For a little while, the conversation had been pretty mundane until he started talking about his lady friend. Without warning, he started to tell me explicit details about his relationship with whoever this woman was. He went on to tell me about how much he likes what he can do to her, his techniques, and, to my horror, how good he is at going down. I knew I must have looked as horrified as I felt because he just started chuckling and went on as though nothing was wrong. He even went so far as to ask if my husband was as good. At this point, not only were the grocery bags digging into my hands and arm, but I was thoroughly creeped the fuck out. I told him I had to go put my groceries away and let out the dogs. I thought that was the end of the conversation, but evidently not, nor was it any less unsettling. "Oh, your man's gone now, huh?" It took my brain a second to realize what he'd said. I never told him my husband was gone. I didn't tell anyone who wasn't a close friend, so naturally, my guard rose. "Yeah," he went on. You need someone here to take care of you." "I'm fine," was all I could really think to say. For some reason, I didn't even bother saying he was wrong. I guess on some level, I thought my husband must have told him. "Well, how about I come by later and make you dinner tonight? I'm one hell of a cook." I knew my brows came together and my eyes were wide because I could feel it. "How about 6? I can come back around 6, make you some dinner, and then we can watch some TV. You really shouldn't be alone." He just kept persisting, which made every hair on my body stand on end. I told him no thanks, didn't even tell him to fuck off, which I have no idea why not, and turned around. Without bothering to look back, I went inside, locked my doors, and waited until I was sure he was gone before letting out my dogs. By the time 6 came, I didn't even want to be in the house in case he did stop by. After making sure everything was locked up tight, I left and drove around for an hour or so before coming home. I didn't even bother turning on more than the TV when I got back, just in case he came by again. I didn't see him for a couple of days, maybe a week and a half. I was a smoker back then and hated smoking in the house, so I'd let the dogs out, smoke a cigarette, then bring them back inside. After Dwayne's disturbing confrontation, I took to smoking in the backyard on my back steps. From where I sat, I could only see a few feet of the main street. Being as our unit was away from the street, beside neighbors who had trees and bushes and the privacy fence between us and the apartments, I felt relatively shielded. I knew that if I saw Dwayne, I'd be more than capable of ducking around the corner of the house and hiding. Like I said, there was just a small strip of the road that left me exposed. It was really easy to stay hidden, or so I thought. One day, I'm standing outside in the front yard talking to the sweet little old lady that lived across the street. We were just having a nice little talk until Dwayne suddenly came walking up. I, of course, felt uneasy, but a little safer with my neighbor there, since I didn't think he'd be as gross as he was before. He wasn't, but he was no less creepy. My neighbor had asked me if I quit smoking because she didn't see me out front anymore. That was usually what she'd use to come out and say hi, since she was always gardening. I didn't immediately answer because Dwayne was there, but it didn't matter. He spoke up first and told my neighbor, "Nah, she smokes in the backyard now." My blood got a chill. Not once, not one single fucking time had I seen him walk by while I was back there, nor did I catch a glimpse of him when I stepped out my front door and walked around back. Never. I politely excused myself and went inside, creeped out as hell. The only way I could think he might have known I was in the back was if he somehow had been watching me through the bushes and trees in my neighbor's yard or through the privacy fence that led to the apartments. Each thought was as disturbing as the last. I couldn't stand the thought of him peering at me from the shadows. That was the last time I smoked outside. I didn't go outside unless I had errands to run until my husband came home a few weeks later. I told him everything, and he admitted that it was creepy as hell, and just told me to keep our mastiff close, and I did. The last time I saw Dwayne was just a glimpse. I let my dogs outside, and a few minutes after sitting back on the couch, I heard my mastiff losing his mind. Anyone who has dogs knows the difference between a normal bark and an angry, "I'm gonna rip your leg off" bark. This was the latter, and it terrified me. Until this point, he'd only ever growled protectively twice and never barked. Freaked out, I opened up the front door and saw Dwayne standing halfway up my driveway. It looked like he'd been walking up to my fence, probably to say hi, when my dog caught sight of him. The bark was so ferocious that I had him and me completely still. My dog continued to bark and even charged the fence, which he could have easily taken down if he wanted. Every hair on the back of his neck and down his spine was standing on end, and it was pretty obviously he wanted a piece of Dwayne. Dwayne glanced at me, forced a smile and a wave, and backed slowly out of the driveway. My dog didn't calm down until he was out of sight, at which time I was able to get him in the house. I was so grateful that I gave him half a package of sliced turkey. I don't know what Dwayne had planned, if anything, but my dog definitely knew something wasn't right. Like I said, we'd been in that house for just over a year, and many times Dwayne had stopped at the fence to talk, and our dog never reacted like that. It still freaks me out to think about why my dog suddenly changed his mind about Dwayne.